Welcome everyone. This is our Giving Circle storytelling webinar. Really happy to have you here joining us. Some of you we've known for a while, some new faces. It's really nice to expand our circle. We're looking forward to hearing from our fellows about their experience with our program. Giving Circle has been in trial for 2 years now. We've been learning as we go, like anything we do at Be the Earth. We love calling it pilot because if it doesn't work or if we change our minds or if it, I don't know, big shift needs to happen, feels okay. And just to give a bit of a context, which most of you should know this, but still nice to give a brief context of what is Giving Circle. It's one of Be the Earth's programs. It's very much about decentralizing decision-making power and making the most of the wisdom and the network and the intelligence of these women that are working on the ground, that are in touch with activists and communities on the ground. And the invitation is that they should design what the decision-making process looks like, what are the criteria, what is the, let's say, personality of this circle as one. And then they must nominate people to receive funds, and then they need to select and disburse these funds. So it's a really interesting experiment. Our money gets much further than it would with decisions being made by our team in an office. So we're really happy that this is happening. Currently, half of the Earth philanthropic budget is disbursed by other people, mostly women, almost pretty much all women, because this sector, the carers, are usually women. So just a few notes before we start. And I'm really excited that you're going to listen much more from the fellows than us. They've been experiencing it in their own ways. So this call is being recorded not only to be used as content and for other people to be able to access the presentation later, but we're also experimenting using this as a report of this program. So With the Earth is always trying to optimize people's time. So anything we ask the fellows to do, we try very hard to make it serve multiple purposes. So in this case, this is now live sharing with you this experience. We'll be able to create content for our communications and social medias and things like that, and also experimenting this as our reporting to the charity commission. So hopefully they will accept that and no one will need to write any extra reports. This is not a open call to funding. I think that's worth aligning right at the beginning of the conversation. This is a space to share the experience, the methodology, how the money has been spent, how this process of decentralizing decision-making and power happens, rather than an opportunity to pitch for different projects. Please follow us on our medias if you don't do yet. We have amazing newsletters with content and opportunities of all of our networks. We have Instagram, theearth.foundation. Also, you can reach out to Jessica Franklin, who's here. She's our comms manager, and she can also post all the details of the channels if you want to follow us. And we will have Q&A in the end. So if you want to, I don't know, make a note of questions or even already post on the chat, feel free to do so. But the dynamic will be basically, I'll finish this introduction and the fellows divided their section in 3. So let's say the process, the experience, and the impact. And you'll know what that means in a minute. But just for those who are arriving now, we are having a bilingual webinar. We have simultaneous translation between Portuguese and English. So if you go to the bottom of the Zoom, you're going to see a little globe written interpretation. And you can click that globe and choose your language. And Mari, has been our translator for a few other experiences as well, she'll be supporting you to understand what's being said. So if you're bilingual, feel free to stay on the neutral original audio. And if you have a preference of one of the languages, choose that channel. And if you're not listening to Mari, that means she's on the other channel. And if you have any issues finding where the translation is, please text us on the chat. All of our team is here witnessing the stories and really happy to have you here. So thank you for creating the time. And I hope you enjoy the journey. And I'll hand over to Susie and Abby to start sharing about their bit of the journey so far. They have been, I think just one extra context here. Sorry about that. I said we're in the second year of our pilot of Giving Circle. We're kind of giving a 3-year cycle as this pilot. And this is our second year with the same circle. And we have 6 women, 2 from each of our main geographies, which are Brazil, South Africa, and England. So you'll learn more about them in a minute, but just to give you some context.
Thanks, Renata. And I'm just, Susie and I have been are going to share a little bit about the Giving Circle methodology first, just to kind of set the scene. And then the others will follow and kind of expand on some of the things that we are talking about. So Renata already talked a little bit about how some of the methodology works, but I'm just going to go through it kind of in order so that you can understand how this all came about. And then Susie will continue in a second here. So we are a circle. Here, yeah, Jess is going to share her screen for us. So we're a circle of 6 women, and each of us is already working on the ground in ways that are aligned with Be the Earth. And as Renata said, we work across 3 continents, in Brazil, South Africa, and in the UK. And each of the 6 women, we're called the Wisdom Keepers, and we are actually given a stipend to cover our time. So our time is covered within this system, let's call it. And then Be the Earth gave us £60,000 this year to distribute basically however we wanted. There was only one request, and that was that Be the Earth asked that we would make the decisions together. So in order to facilitate that, we met 6 to 8 times across the year on Zoom. And all of those sessions were facilitated by Be the Earth, but in a very a gentle way. So they helped keep us accountable, but there was lots of space for us to figure out, what does this process look like? It really did feel like at the beginning, it was a little bit daunting because it was really just figuring it out. And yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge also that we're 6 women. We didn't know each other previously. And so part of being able to make collective decisions was that we needed to find a collective identity so we could make those decisions together, and then also widen our thinking a bit and invite in the more than human world into our decision-making process. And that felt really important. So I'll hand over to Susie to explain a bit more about that.
Thank you, Abby. So one of the ways that the sessions were facilitated was for us to explore our shared identity as a way of coming up with what our persona, our talents, and also our priorities were, leading towards what we would prioritize funding. And in that process, we kind of evolved this sense of this mother tree, or a tree in the forest that is connected into lots of other trees. And as we did that, the tree that came forward was Jakitaba, and we described, and we sort of went back in to reflect more collectively on what the identity was of that mother tree and deepen our expression of the persona and talents. So we ended up describing her as a young grandmother, So the quality of a grandmother, but also, you know, acknowledging what it is to step into supporting in that way as early on, not maybe at like millions of years, thousands of years old. And then also to really look at, well, if we're thinking of how it is that the trees connect in the forest and how it is that they support ecosystems, then that again allowed us to deepen that sense of what would the priorities be of a grandmother tree. So we did meditations that allowed us to kind of have group coherence around what arose in our bodies that the earth was saying through us needed funding. And then in the process of nominating the different individuals, projects and organizations that came forwards, each wisdom keeper was sort of acting as a representative of the whole in those choices, and then bringing them back to the group to reflect on. We also, as wisdom keepers, had responsibility for sharing back the experience of the organizations, individuals and groups that we donated to, and those were done in a very light way through stories and photos in a way that didn't place the burden of reporting onto the grantees. I'm going to pass back to Abby.
Great. And just to highlight that Chiquitibá tree is it's just such a beautiful being. And thanks to our Brazilian counterparts our Brazilian wisdom keepers for kind of bringing that into I had never heard of it before. So that was a real joy as well. Okay, so, and then we just wanted to expand a little bit on, you know, what are the advantages of this way of doing things? And how is this different from other funding methodologies in our experience, which, to be fair, I haven't been a funder that often. So it's a relatively new experience, but certainly this funding methodology, you know, it is built heavily on trust. That was very clear. The funders had to trust us, we had to trust each other, and then also we had to trust those we were giving money to. And I guess that's part of the lack of reporting in there. But it did feel like by starting from a place of trust, it was radically different, both as a giver and also for those receiving the money. That was the feedback we got. So that was it felt radical and special. And then another thing that was, important in the giving circle is because there was no predefined paperwork in terms of receiving the funds, and even very little for us. So that, in fact, you know, telling the story of the journey, it's at the feet of the wisdom keepers. And that really freed the grantees from any administration and bureaucracy, and it felt so light. And again, had lots of positive feedback on that. And then also for me, it was important that, you know, we're 6 practitioners. So we used our on the ground networks and knowledge to get money to people. And I think, of course, as we discussed, it isn't without its own biases. But it did also mean that the people getting the money weren't those who were best at writing applications or who had connections directly to funders necessarily. It just made it one more step removed. And that felt exciting in itself as well. I'm going to pass to Susie. Susie's going to share a few more things. And can you change the slide, please? Jess, thank you.
Oh gosh, for translation.
Sorry.
So sorry. Okay, well, we've shifted slide here because we wanted to illustrate that there is a well-worn path of conventional funding which has many advantages because everybody knows how it works and how to get places, and it can be quite effective and quick and mainstream in that sense. And so we're highlighting the path of the motorway, and then maybe we might switch over to the path we took, which feels like it was emergent in how we were listening to what was needed, and also then sometimes took us outside what was as easy to do. And we were listening for and evolving the structure as we did that. So that sense of what we were listening for and what emerged was, in a sense, leaving behind the kind of colonial approach to giving where funders do, and it's hard to stop enacting a sort of soft power, and also the extraction of data or extracting of reports from communities in response to that power of having the money that you're giving. So this path that we took, and with the massive support of Be the Earth in terms of the work they've done with the Charity Commission to support being able to report in this way, meant that we were shifting to something that feels like it embodied more of a gift economy, or an economy of generosity. The observations I'd like to bring super quick was that bringing 6 women together felt really important, and it was an observation that the way 6 women got together and how it is to be working on behalf of nature through the mother trees, that there's a remarkable coherence in what it was that we wanted to fund, and what it was that we felt were the funding questions, and what that meant in different landscapes. And bearing in mind, we've all come from different backgrounds, different landscapes, the coherence was profound. And there are some ways in which going off the mainstream motorway of funding makes you really see how the systems are lined up for the systems to maintain status quo. And it can be a little bit harder to find your way around banking systems in countries giving communities money who are doing work that potentially doesn't maintain the status quo, but changes it in terms of taking care of the earth. And I think that's us. But we're really happy to answer questions. And I'd really love to pass over to Claudia and Zayan in terms of the experience.
Hello, I'm Claudia from Brazil.
I'm Zayan from South Africa.
I will share here, and Zayan, do you start? Here, our dear Jequitiba.
So we will be discussing some of it echoed from what Abby and Susie were saying. But we thought we'd do a little introduction about who we are. Here we are. This is how we see each other. This is how we met. This is how we continue to meet each other as we meet everyone here today. And you will meet us individually in these next slides. And it has been a real joy to know these women and to be part of this process, this very nerve-wracking, scary, but joyful process altogether.
It was, in the beginning, it was very weird because all those women we never met before, and we were suddenly in the Zoom meetings, and we had to know each other and start a project that nobody never tried something similar before, isn't it, Zayan?
Exactly. And because of this idea, this concept of the giving circle that was gifted to us, we sat with that discomfort, and we sat with that uncertainty, and began to slowly, through the process of knowing each other and spending this time together, began to build this methodology that really became a journey. And we were guided by our ethics, our responsibility, and how we could communicate that with one another. And in this process, in this emergent process, we were able to really build on that trust, and eventually were able to find one foot in front of the other, and walk this journey together. And then, Amiga, what did we decide to do, Claudia?
We decided some criteria that would be a ground for us. We decided to focus on women activists, Black women, indigenous people, regenerative agriculture, and projects that were around these subjects. So we will not talk about the impact. It will be to Musa and Priscilla in a few minutes. But we are finishing the second cycle, and this one was a bit more comfortable, isn't it, Zion? Because we had passed the track already one time, and then this year we started from some place more that we knew already.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with us starting 2023 with that experience and having the tangible confirmation and reflection from the grantees, gave us enough impetus and energy and focus for 2023, so that when we came to needing Jikitiba, it was the perfect tool for us to vision our 2023 journey. And in that process, and specifically in one day, that Susie, when we felt we were at a block and we felt that we were having difficulty moving on, which happens from time to time. But Susie held us in a very beautiful moment of, everybody calm down, close your eyes, and see deep in your intuitive spirit, deep in yourself. What do you see when we stand around Jikitiba and we're standing with each other? And it was a beautiful moment because it confirmed the work that we wish to do in our lives, and how we can reflect that through this giving circle process of philanthropy. And so we again focused on, we're then able to decide on our focus themes, I guess, for this round of funding.
Yeah, I will talk a bit about my own experience. I've learned a lot, and I've also learned how to start to work with people that I would never meet personally, probably, and that are in other continents with other backgrounds and etc. And it's a mind-opening experience. And in the end, I feel that I mastered the social technology, and now I'm replicating it in Brazil in a new project, a private environmental services payment that I'm building with a friend. And I never had this idea to make this new project with no bureaucracy, without the experience of Giving Circle. And as Susie said, it's all based on trust. Trust each other, trust the relationships that are born during the process, starting without knowing exactly what will happen. And this is the learning by doing method, the expression in English I learned with Be the Earth. And from me it worked. For me it worked. And that's it. And how was it for you personally, Zion?
Yeah, it was, I had just had a baby when we started in 2022, and I was afraid to commit to something because my experience of having a baby before, there wasn't space to join some online group. But I think with Renata's persistence and belief in this, in the value of what it is that we're doing, for me, it was the safest possible space that I could find to be in the world again. Even if it was through this small camera on my screen, and being in this kind of, also as Abby, I've had very little to do with direct funding, but having this perspective now there's, you know, it's been remarkable, and I'm so grateful for the value that this has added to my kind of repertoire. But more than anything, it's been the relationships and the way of thinking and being in this emergent process together, which was very uncomfortable and scary, but it ended up being amazing, really beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. And now we pass to Pri and Musa.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Musa Gwebani, and I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. And I've worked in civil society for 10 years. And I've worked with and for funding institutions for about the same length of time. And so I was quite well versed in the bureaucracy of funding and what it meant. So when Renata invited me, I came very ready with my Excel skills and how to read a budget. And I was going to ask for audits and all those very important things, and how much money they had in their account and how many employees they had and whether or not they were paying tax. Those were really my concerns when I first joined, and I was taken to a very different world. I was really expecting that impact would look like log frames, would look like contributions to SDGs, but we were called to do something very different. And I think in many ways I was called to be different. And that instead of proposing a way of working, we responded to ways that people were working. We went to people, people did not come to us. We found them where they were with what they were doing, and we wanted to support it and to give it life. And that is really the work of Be the Earth. And so the impact story is a soft one and a very serious one too. It's soft in that we gave people ease. We gave people something less to think about, something to not have to worry about, as money can become an anxiety-inducing, consuming thing. We allowed people to be able to imagine something different with the funds that we were giving them, because they were not restricted and they were not restrained, and they came with no conditionalities. And so really the work could reach people where it was needed. I personally reached out to a community of women in rural South Africa in Port Alfred who worked on a food garden, on a community food garden. And they were grandchildren who also they take care of, and they take care of their greater communities, as women often do in these parts of the world. Yet what they cannot do, what the community at large finds very difficult to do, is to be able to access fresh food and vegetables on a regular basis, because it is one of the more expensive things to do. To get a taxi for $2 to buy a cabbage for $0.50 doesn't often make sense in those communities. And so people go without much needed nutrition. So what they do with those gardens, that they bridge a very important gap. They allow members of the community, which often struggle with chronic illnesses, to be able to have access to food in order for them to take their medication. They also allow for people to not have to worry about paying transport in order to buy cabbage. They also introduce variety, seasonal variety into their diets, which is so important for a balanced and nutritional lifestyle. And I would like to say that our impact then is probably solving world hunger. And in many ways, we are contributing to beginning to solving world hunger. Because with this small example, with £4,000 or £3,000, what we're beginning to do is to seed decentralized food systems, where food is locally made and people can access it with ease, and to begin to strengthen those community initiatives and see the value in them. What we've been able to help them do is to buy a water harvesting tank so they can survive the less rainy seasons, and for them to buy a fence so that dogs and other animals do not come and ruin their crop. And that has been our impact. It has been able to to see and to reach people who would otherwise never be reached, who could never fill out a form, who do not have audit reports, and sometimes don't even have Facebook, and struggle often with basic literacy. And we, as these 6 women, have bridged that gap between the bureaucracy and the people. Yesterday I was saying to some women that we were on a call with that we're not making fetch happen, if people understand the Mean Girls reference. We are going to where fetch is happening and hoping to make some kind of difference with what we've been able to do. And so our impact is doing very small things that have a very, very big impact in the communities in which they exist, and giving legitimacy and giving dignity to the work that women everywhere in the world are doing with very little recognition and very little money and support. My colleague, friend, fellow, Priscilla, will add on some of the work that the projects have been able to do that we've supported.
Hi, everyone. I'm Priscila. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will speak in Portuguese, so change your channel right now. Primeiro eu quero pedir licença de estar aqui nesse território junto com essas mulheres que eu aprendi muito durante esses 2 dias, que eu tenho honrado poder trocar e poder compartilhar dessa missão que nos foi dada, né, de compartilhar esses tempos e todas as outras coisas. Eu vou compartilhar especificamente um investimento que a gente fez numa comunidade que chama-se de Fortaleza, que fica no município de Uarini, no Amazonas, que é uma comunidade de manejadores de pirarucu, e eles carregavam esse peixe, que é o maior das águas doces, né, por 30 minutos até a parte em que eles podiam cuidar desses peixes, assim. Então, são peixes de mais de 100 quilos, e eles carregavam no meio da mata durante 30 minutos. E quando eu fui lá a primeira vez, eu fiquei pensando se eu tivesse oportunidade, como eu ajudaria essa comunidade. E fiquei pensando e pensando, e claro que eu não cheguei numa conclusão, porque somente as comunidades sabem exatamente o que elas precisam. Eu acho que o Giving Cycle aconteceu nesse sentido da gente poder ouvir as comunidades e, a partir dessa escuta, a gente poder investir. Então, a escuta como metodologia de investimento foi um dos aprendizados mais profundos que a gente teve durante esses anos. E aí eu tive a oportunidade de voltar lá, eu conversei, perguntei o que eles queriam, e eles me pediram uma moto com carrocinha, para eu falar mais devagar, é isso, Dani? E aí, essa moto carrega até 5 peixes de uma vez só. Então, eu conversei com o Rosicleudo semana passada, eu falei, me conta como é que a gente... O que mudou a partir daí? Eles falaram, Pri, a gente pôde otimizar esse trabalho. Então, antes a gente fazia em 3 pessoas que ficavam revezando esse peixe, que demorava 30 minutos para chegar, agora a gente consegue chegar mais rápido para que as mulheres possam fazer o beneficiamento desse peixe. E aí, esse segundo investimento, eu perguntei também para eles, se tivesse uma grana, o que vocês gostariam? E aí eles me passaram uma lista de coisas que eu não tinha a menor noção do que era o processo das malhadeiras, que elas são maiores para que os peixes pequenos possam passar, e aí quando eles pegam os pirarucus, que é um tempo de manejamento, né, eles podem pescar durante 2 meses, e aí o que eles pescavam em 2 meses, agora eles estão pescando em 15 dias. Então, esse último manejo que eles fizeram, eles pegaram 370 pirarucus em 15 dias, e isso gera qualidade de vida, né? Gera saúde, gera uma coluna melhor cuidada, e as mulheres também que fazem esse processo de cuidado do peixe também, e aí eles conseguem organizar mais, porque como tem tempo de manejo, uma época é do pirarucu, outra época é do tambaqui, outra época eles manejam madeira, eles conseguem se organizar, e isso gera qualidade de vida e presença das pessoas da comunidade. Então, eu fui semana passada para dar esse curso. Quanto tempo eu tenho, Rê? 2 minutos? Nem isso. Dar esse curso de livro artesanal e estavam lá os 30 manejadores participando do curso, porque eles conseguiram se liberar antes desse processo da pesca. Então, e o Give and Cycle é exatamente isso, a gente poder olhar para as pessoas que precisam, eu achei que a Jazz ia passar as fotos. E aí a gente vai aprendendo. Então tem a Dilma, que é uma mulher indígena de uma comunidade que chama Todi, que é ribeirinha também. E aí quando eu encontrei, ela estava com uma dor, tinha emagrecido vários quilos, e aí era um processo de pedra no rim. E com a grana que a gente investiu, ela pode melhor cuidar das filhas. E aí agora eu mandei um áudio para ela, ela me contou, Pri, tá tudo certo, tô sem dor, tô conseguindo seguir a vida. Então, às vezes, quando a gente investe numa pessoa específica, a gente consegue mudar a estrutura da comunidade e quando a gente investe nesses processos, né? E pensar assim, o Arini, pensasse de Fortaleza, uma comunidade que há 2 anos não tinha internet, que não tem esse processo para poder fazer essa comunicação. Então, pensar isso, né? Como a gente chega, eu faço uma compra numa loja em Tefé e demora 2 dias para chegar esse barco, essa carrocinha que vai de barco, e aí depois de 2 dias ele me manda a comunicação, chegou. Então eu acho que também é como as meninas falaram da confiança, né? É esse processo de confiar e acreditar que as coisas vão ser mobilizadas. E aí tem vários outros exemplos, mas a gente vai abrir para perguntas. E eu quero agradecer novamente as minhas parceiras de Give and Cycle, que a gente pôde construir esse círculo de mulheres à distância e que reverberou e impactou profundamente a vida de muitas pessoas nesses 3 continentes.
Obrigada, Pri. Thank you so much. So going back to the English, Portuguese channels if you need to. I felt goosebumps half the way. I'm not going to speak much because I want us to have as much time as we can with questions. So feel free to either raise your hands or post on the chat. I think I just want to bring a couple of highlights of things that were said. And I think the richness of this process is having people like these 6 women, but using Priscilla's example of being on the community, having the relationship, and literally seeing that one motorcycle could change the structure of a whole community. That's really powerful. And usually as funders, we are in our offices making lots of data research and hiring 50 consultants to talk about all the theories and the books and the histories. And then it's like listening as a methodology. How simple is that? Not only to disburse funding, but for life. I think that was a big highlight. And also just the openness to sit with the discomfort. So I really thank you all for accepting that. I know it's not always easy nor fun. And that's how we change the status quo, right? Because we don't know yet. No one have done this before. So how does it work? How do we build this trust online? How do we create who we are together? And it's not a 1-minute answer, nor a 1 meeting answer. So thank you for that. And yeah, so as I said, we have, let's say, until 27 past the hour. I'm going to be very British here, trying to leave a couple of minutes to close our time and honor everyone's working time as well. So if you have any comments or questions, or even the fellows, if there's anything that you're like, I really wish I had time to have said that, also feel free to use this space. Abby?
I think I wanted to reiterate it was interesting to me that I had never been in a situation that was all women like this. and to collectively make decisions. And it was different. And I just, I think that came through in a few ways, but I think to just reiterate how interesting it was to think about power and to think about the dynamics of making decisions and sharing and sitting with that discomfort. I think that was particularly raw, and as a group of 6 women, somehow it didn't feel as, I don't know, like we all sat in the silence a little bit, even though, and that was different. Yeah, sometimes in more mixed dynamics, I've noticed, people are quicker to jump in and take charge. And there was just a real lack of that. So I appreciated that. And I think, yeah, to reiterate how unusual that is in my experience, in my working world.
Thank you, Abby. There are 2 questions on the chat that I think are more directed to Be the Earth, so I'm going to answer them, but feel free to add new questions, or if you want to ask one of the fellows something directly as well, that's possible. So in terms of how did we choose the 6 women, that's a great question. We chose them by trust. So I think that's one of the beauties and the challenges of trust-based philanthropy, is that we can only trust who we know and who we have relationship with already. So I personally had some of these relationships, having worked on the ground in Brazil and in a global program for change makers, and also our UK-based team, Seth, who's my partner and founder of Be the Earth as well, already had some relationships. So we invited women that we deeply appreciated their work, their commitment, their passion. We knew that they could access people who wouldn't otherwise access any grant opportunities, and that were aligned with our themes as well. So all lives on Earth, a bit more environmental, traditional communities, food systems, and things like that, even though when you're talking systemic, it all connects. But yeah, we started with the women who we already knew. So when we talk about pilots and trying things for the first time, we always do that with people we already have relationship. And luckily so having these women that we know enables us to expand our network and access grassroots groups and individuals that we wouldn't otherwise. And also when their cycle finishes, which will be a 3-year cycle, they will nominate new fellows. And that's how, again, we expand our step a bit further, which is a little tricky because I know it's like not ideal that we're working with our friends, but that's who we trust. So it's a contradiction that we sit with, and we just acknowledge that's how we're managing to execute trust-based now. And then if I want to donate to Giving Circle, yay, that's exciting. So we're always open to co-fund things. It happened in different programs that people funded. We're really excited about one of our programs, and they chose to fund that. That enabled us to host more retreats and expand the stipends for the women we were working with. So we can definitely talk about that and either co-create a new circle or increase the amount to be donated by this circle. So definitely reach out, Joanna. And then evaluation to create it. So that's something we're sitting with. How to evaluate, because as Musa started speaking, right, there's no like all the diligence and all the paperwork and things like that. What we ask from the fellows is this shared responsibility of bringing us the stories. So most of the grants given were a huge success, like 2 cases we heard now, and there are always the risk that someone will change their life moment, or I don't know, have an emergency that will make them not do what they said they would do. And that's, I think, part of trust. And the way we try to do that is through stories. And some of the stories have data and like quantitative data and some of them don't. So it's like, how do you measure that someone's back now has no issue anymore, you know, because they don't need to carry 100 kilos fish. It's only by conversation. It's only by active listening. So that's how so far we've been measuring that is through stories and of course counting in terms of, so this year we disbursed 60,000 pounds for 24 different projects and people. So that's a lot of grants given that we would never be able to manage by ourselves or reach them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's still in development. BD Earth has been developing some indicators, and we're going to try to kind of navigate between quantitative and qualitative results, whatever that means. We are a bit in a crisis, the belief that these measurements serve us in many ways. How can this experience be used as an example to guide more philanthropy? Does anyone wants to try to answer this? Fellows or even anyone from the audience? How can this experience be used as an example to guide more philanthropy to give through trust-based processes? Claudia already shared one experience. Maybe she could start answering, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
I believe what we are doing here today is already a step, because it's not broadly known, this concept of giving circle and the non-bureaucracy, and the numbers are not all. We have qualitative results also, and the stories as impact indicator, something like that. And we can keep talking and exchanging this experience. And I believe that everyone that are here today, my friends that went into the process, people from BD Earth, people that are listening to these stories, can be from now on the ones that will that will spread the news.
Thanks, Claudia. Annie?
I just want to add, as someone that has been involved in the background and from the perspective of funders, to Sarah's question, is that there's a big element of taking risks on the funder side. And actually, well, we've been discussing a lot about power, right? And there's thin line in between relinquishing power, but at the same time using power. But sometimes I think that funders try not to exert power, and that could be a mistake as well. So what is a good use of power in that sense? Taking risks is one of them. And that's kind of what we try to do with BD Earth. It's basically, we know that it's risky. We know there are some things at stake here, as for instance, you mentioned, maybe the money won't go where you planned. But then again, if not the funders, who are going to make these types of decisions, and who is going to take these risks? And I think that in the funder side, risk taking is a bit more needed than currently we're seeing.
And just before Susie keeps going, I just want to add that that's why trust-based is also so powerful, right? Because I think that decreases risk, because people, you have a relationship, are there, and you're trusting them, and they will really make the most they can to perform and honor your trust. So it's like a reciprocity, virtuous cycle. Susie.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when you're saying how, it's taking the time to listen, and that listening is both to the people that you are looking to support, and looking to hear from and what works for them, but also in your body in terms of what is emergent. And I think there is a change in the financial systems and in philanthropy that is listening to something that wants to be working a different way. And so I think part of what happened was that it was incredible to have the space where we were able to do that listening, and then to support the emergence of the structures that seemed like they were coming forwards, and then enact that, and then sort of manifest that, if you like, by flowing money through and new channels. So I just thought I'd put that in.
Yeah, I think Susie's a great example that really tried to challenge the system and all the, like underfunded and indigenous people fighting with the miners and, the big players and all that. And you need to be very stubborn, or you need to just surrender and say, okay, that's too much to me. So I might go a different path. Like they started talking about the paths, and it's like, how much risk or how much stubbornness, basically, are you willing to have in order to support those you think are worth supporting in this structure, right? Musa.
Thank you, Renata. I actually think also like a big part of it is for us to practice being brave outside of just risk. I think even a lot of the big philanthropies, and I work every day dispersing millions of euros to organizations, money doesn't always go where money is said to go, despite all the audits and all the reports and the site visits and the calls and the emails. It is, even those systems, what they do is that they create lethargy and they create fatigue and they frustrate the people on the ground, because often also they're unable to actually meet the needs because they're so prescriptive that either people use them incorrectly, so they don't go where they said they could go, or people don't use them at all because they're afraid of making a mistake. And I think what is really important also is whenever we are making an investment, or perhaps a different word, a contribution, we are always being brave. And we are believing that what we are doing is intended for good, and that the people that it will reach will do the best that they can with it. I do not believe there's any way to avert risk. Every single day, I am dealing with organizations who have misspent, misunderstood, did not know how, whether in goodwill or nefariously, misspent the money. I don't think there's a way to provide you with a foolproof method of nothing will go wrong. What we do, though, is that we trust each other, and we trust one another, and we trust the people that we support. And we're brave doing it. Even when we're wrong, we're brave. Didn't work out. We'll try again.
Exactly. And I think my question, we had a case of an indigenous activist leader that then decided to pay his family debt instead of doing the community thing. And it's like, is that a mistake? Like now he can breathe and keep being an activist instead of, I don't know, being arrested or kicked out of his house or whatever. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's a mistake. Of course, we wouldn't wish that every single grantee used like that. But if they're playing a relevant role to the community, it's like the usual airplane mask thing, right? You need to put your mask first in order to be able to serve others. So I think that's I think the word risk and courage are strong ones, and even questioning what does risk even mean? I think there's more risk the big corporations or government that take the money and buy their own private jets and go, like do things that don't serve anyone. But anyway, that's for another conversation. So we have 2 minutes left. Let me see. There's one more. Yeah. Thanks, Flavia. It's less about doing what you think people want from you and more about being your truth and honoring the context you are, right? Okay, so any last comments or questions before we close?
There's one question there. Hey, it's about the
sorry.
So it's Maria Marks questions, and she says, what is the biggest challenge you faced? And what's the next steps with the communities?
I'll let the fellows answer those.
Well, I could really quickly jump in and say it is a massive challenge trying to get some funding through to communities when they're not communities who are readily enabled to receive funding or are supported by their governments or their banks to receive funding, or particularly with elders where they may not even be massively involved in some of the systems and administration that means you can transfer or sign agreements. So people who are supporting amazing regenerative work outside the system are really hard to reach and support through the system in order to support that additional work. And that's one of the bits I found really tough.
Thanks, Susie. I think I'll just close saying, like, in terms of the communities, most of these fellows are in constant relationship with the community, so things will still keep flowing. Most of the communities that were supported last year were also supported this year, so that's a way of keeping this support going. And I think supporting infrastructure is also a huge way of longevity in terms of how far, it's not like, okay, enable these people to eat tonight one meal and then tomorrow they have no food again. But like Priscilla's example, now they have this transport that can serve them not only to fish pirarucu, but also all the other cycles of nature they work with during the year. So I think, I think building this infrastructure to generate autonomy is a way to go. So thank you so much. You're invited to get in touch with us, follow us on Instagram or receive our newsletter. Also, like Joanna mentioned, if you're interested in either donating to this circle or creating your own or creating a partnership, we're very open to that. We love working collaboratively. And any questions also how to set up, a bit more of an operational things. We're really happy to share this because we highly believe it's very effective and very magical way of disbursing funds and reaching people on the ground. So feel free to get in touch anytime. You're going to receive an email with the recording and our contacts and all that. So feel free to also spread the word and inspire more people. I think in times of so many overwhelming news, it's always good to have some dose of hope and inspiration. And thank you, fellows, again for your time for creating this webinar and our whole journey together. And thank you, everyone, for creating the time. And 14th of November, don't forget, we have our other webinar for our flow funding program. That it's quite similar approach, but in a more individual basis. And these fellows will also be sharing their own experiences. So we'd love to see you there as well. Bye. Have a nice day, everyone.